Marrying her is the safest move I've ever made. Casey stopped walking. She wasn't meant to hear it. She was barefoot, holding the edge of her silk robe, moving quietly down the hallway behind the Charleston Chapel's bridal suite. Guests were arriving. The organist was rehearsing. Her wedding was 3 hours away. Inside the half-closed library door, Toby's voice lowered. She has the trust, the property, the contracts. After today, everything aligns. I just have to get through the ceremony. A softer voice replied, Amora. And love? She asked. A short laugh followed. Love isn't in the contract. Silence. Another voice, one of the groomsmen. You're sure she doesn't know? Toby didn't hesitate. Casey worships me. That sentence didn't break her heart. It corrected it. Casey did not gasp. She did not push the door open. She did not collapse into tears like the fragile bride everyone assumed she would be. She simply stood there. Her hand loosened from the silk at her waist. Her breathing slowed. One heartbeat struck hard against her ribs, and then the next came steady, controlled. Inside the library, low laughter continued. Glass clinked. Chairs shifted. Outside the door, something inside her settled into place. Not grief, not panic. Clarity. The version of Toby she loved still existed in her memory. But the man speaking in that room had exposed something cleaner, colder, strategic, measured. Casey worships me. No, she respected him. She challenged him. She chose him. Worship had never been part of it. Her spine straightened. The hallway suddenly felt longer, quieter. The distant music from the sanctuary carried faintly through the walls. Guests were taking their seats. Programs were being handed out. Her name was printed in gold across thick ivory paper. Bride, fiancée, future wife. None of those titles felt broken. They felt temporary. Casey reached into the pocket of her robe. Her phone was already there. She did not storm into the room. She did not announce herself. She did not give them the satisfaction of chaos. She pressed record. Through the narrow gap of the door, Toby's voice continued, relaxed and confident. Once we're married, the trust aligns under shared structure. She won't question me. She never does. A quiet chuckle followed. Amora again. You always said she was different. She is, Toby replied. Different doesn't mean permanent. Casey's thumb hovered over the screen for 1 second. Then she steadied it. Every word entered cleanly into her phone. This was no misunderstanding. No misheard phrase. No taken out of context sentence. This was intent. 3 hours from now, she was scheduled to walk down the aisle at St. Michael's Chapel, under white florals and crystal lighting, in front of 300 guests who believed they were witnessing love. 3 hours. Casey ended the recording. The wedding was still on schedule. Pause here for a second. If you were standing outside that door, hours before your wedding, and you heard the person you were about to marry say, love isn't in the contract, would you still walk down the aisle? Be honest. Would you confront them privately? Would you cancel everything? Or would you do what Casey did? Comment yes if you would still walk down that aisle. Comment no if you would walk away immediately. And if you believe loyalty should never be mistaken for weakness, take 1 second to like this video. It helps this story reach more people who need to hear it. Subscribe to Mr. Victor Storytime for real stories about dignity, strength, and the kind of decisions that define you for life. Now, let's go back to the hallway, because Casey wasn't done. Approve part 4, and I'll proceed to part 5, transition into story. Proceed. Hook part 5, transition into story. Target 180 to 220 words. Casey slid her phone back into her robe. Inside the library, Toby was still talking, still planning, still certain. Outside the door, the bride adjusted her shoulders and walked away. Not toward confrontation, toward preparation. When she stepped back into the bridal suite, her maid of honor looked up immediately. You look pale. Are you okay? Casey smiled. Everything's perfect. Her voice did not shake. Her hands did not tremble. She moved toward the mirror. The dress hung beside it, white silk catching the morning light. 3 hours from now, she would walk down the aisle. The ceremony would begin. The guests would watch, and Toby would stand at the altar expecting obedience. Casey looked at her reflection, steady and composed. She did not cancel the wedding. She upgraded the ending. Casey Whitmore did not grow up with connections. She grew up in a 2-bedroom duplex in Oak Cliff, Dallas. Her mother worked double shifts as a nurse. Her father left before she turned 8. There were no trust funds, no quiet safety net waiting in the background. What she had was discipline. At 16, she was already studying market trends instead of gossip. By 22, she had graduated from the University of Texas at Austin with a degree in finance and one clear goal: ownership. Her first investment was not glamorous. A distressed 4-unit property on the south side of Dallas. The roof leaked. The wiring needed work. Banks dismissed her application twice before one agreed to a small commercial loan. She renovated it herself. She negotiated directly with contractors. She learned zoning laws. She made mistakes and corrected them without drama. Within 18 months, the property was fully leased. She didn't celebrate loudly. She reinvested. By 28, Casey controlled 7 small residential properties across Texas. By 31, she transitioned into strategic acquisitions, identifying undervalued commercial spaces and restructuring them for long-term growth. No inheritance had built that. No partner had funded that. Every contract bore her signature alone. In industry meetings, older executives often mistook her for someone's assistant. She never corrected them immediately. She waited until numbers were discussed. Then she spoke. And when she did, she spoke in facts. Risk exposure ratios, long-term appreciation curves, liquidity timing. Her reputation formed quietly but firmly. Casey Whitmore did not chase wealth. She built structure. She built leverage. And she built it without asking anyone for permission. They met in Chicago. The annual Midwestern Commercial Real Estate Summit was held at the Marriott Magnificent Mile that year. Executives filled the ballroom in tailored suits, polished shoes, and rehearsed confidence. Casey was not there to network socially. She was presenting. Her panel focused on undervalued urban redevelopment corridors across Texas and Georgia. She spoke without filler, without charm tactics, without softening her analysis to make anyone comfortable. In the third row sat Toby Byrne, New York-based, private equity background, sharp navy suit, precise posture. He had reviewed her portfolio before the conference. On paper, she was impressive. In person, she was controlled. After the panel, he approached her near the coffee station. "You don't look impressed by this room," he said, offering a measured smile. "I don't invest in rooms," she replied. "I invest in assets." That pause between them lasted a second longer than polite. Most people admired Toby immediately. His reputation preceded him. He was known for scaling mid-size portfolios quickly and exiting at high multiples. Casey did not react to his status. She asked questions instead. "What's your long-term hold strategy on distressed retail conversions?" she asked. He answered. She challenged the numbers. He adjusted. The exchange was not flirtation. It was evaluation, Toby noticed. He was used to attention, used to being admired for his decisiveness. Casey did not admire him. She assessed him, and that unsettled him in a way he did not expect. When they parted that afternoon, he asked for her number, not casually, intentionally. "Let's compare notes on redevelopment projections," he said. Casey held his gaze for a moment before responding. "Send me your analysis first." He smiled. For the first time that day, he felt challenged. The first call lasted 40 minutes. The second lasted 2 hours. What began as a discussion about acquisition thresholds turned into debates about leverage timing, debt exposure, and expansion strategy across state lines. They disagreed often. Casey never softened her stance to flatter him. Toby never backed down without a counterpoint. Late-night calls became routine. Chicago to Dallas, Dallas to New York. Time zones blurred into focused conversations about risk and ambition. But somewhere between spreadsheets and projections, something shifted. There was a moment during one call when Toby paused mid-sentence. "You enjoy arguing with me," he said. "I enjoy being right," Casey replied. He laughed, but there was heat beneath it. The first time they met outside a conference setting was in New York. Toby invited her to review a property proposal from his penthouse overlooking Lake Michigan during a Chicago follow-up trip. The view stretched wide and silver beneath the evening sky. They stood by the window with glasses of water untouched on the table. "You don't get intimidated easily," he observed. "You don't get told no often," she answered. The distance between them narrowed naturally, not rushed, not clumsy. He reached for her wrist mid-sentence, stopping her as she turned away. "You challenge me," he said quietly. "You don't scare me," she replied. The kiss was slow, measured, testing. He did not overpower her. She did not surrender. It was deliberate, two strong personalities adjusting to proximity. That night did not weaken her judgment. It complicated it, because the attraction was real, and so was the ambition in his eyes. Casey noticed it the first night she stayed over, not during the kiss, not during the quiet conversation that followed. But afterward, they were standing in his kitchen, the city lights stretching wide beyond the windows. Toby poured water into 2 glasses, movements precise, almost calculated. He handed her one, watching her in a way that was more analytical than affectionate. "You don't lean on anyone," he said. "I've never needed to," she replied. There it was, a flicker in his expression, admiration, and something else. He liked her strength. He respected her discipline. But there was a subtle tension in him whenever she made it clear she could walk away from anything, including him. Over the next few weeks, she began to notice patterns. He liked leading conversations. He preferred being the one who decided where they dined, what deals they reviewed, which opportunities deserved attention. When she disagreed, he smiled. But he also recalculated. It was small, controlled, almost invisible to anyone less observant. Once, during a strategy debate, she corrected one of his projections. He went quiet, not offended, assessing. "You don't miss much," he said. "No," she answered. He stepped closer then, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "You're rare," he murmured. It sounded like a compliment. It was, but beneath it, Casey sensed something sharper. He admired her. He wanted her. He was drawn to her independence. Yet part of him seemed determined to measure it, manage it, contain it. She did not confront the feeling. She simply stored it away, because admiration mixed with calculation can still look like love. At first, the call came on a Tuesday afternoon. Casey was reviewing a mixed-use development proposal in her Dallas office when her attorney's name appeared on her screen. She almost let it go to voicemail. "Casey," he said once she answered, voice unusually formal, "we need to discuss your uncle's estate." Her uncle, Raymond Whitmore, had been distant most of her life. He invested quietly, lived privately in Santa Fe. They exchanged cards on holidays, nothing more. "He passed last week," her attorney continued. "You're listed as primary beneficiary." The number he mentioned did not feel real at first. Multi-million-dollar trust, commercial holdings in Arizona and Colorado, liquid assets. Casey didn't react dramatically. She asked for documentation. Then she called Toby. He flew to Dallas that weekend. At first, he framed it as support. "That's incredible," he said, pulling her into a firm embrace. "You deserve this." She believed him. But later that night, after the champagne and congratulations, his questions shifted. How is the trust structured? Is it revocable? Who manages the board? He said it was strategic curiosity. He was in finance, after all. Still, his tone carried a new intensity. He studied the documents longer than she did. "Once we're married," he said casually, "it would make sense to align certain protections." Casey leaned back slightly. "Protections for who?" she asked. "For us," he replied. The word sounded inclusive. but something in his voice sounded proprietary. Until that moment, everything she had built belonged solely to her. Now, suddenly, it felt like something being assessed, measured, evaluated. The changes did not arrive loudly. They arrived in suggestions. "Have you thought about consolidating oversight?" Toby asked one evening while reviewing her trust documents at his Manhattan apartment. "Consolidating what exactly?" Casey replied. "Asset management, tax exposure, long-term liquidity planning. If we're building a life together, alignment matters." Alignment. It sounded reasonable. He never demanded access. He never insisted on signatures. He framed everything as efficiency, as partnership, as foresight. But the frequency increased. Joint strategy calls might streamline things. "We should consider a unified holding structure. You don't want unnecessary fragmentation." Casey listened carefully. She noticed how often the phrase, "once we're married," entered conversations. Once we're married, we can restructure. Once we're married, we can optimize. Once we're married, we can protect everything properly. The emphasis shifted from emotional unity to financial consolidation. One night, during dinner at a quiet restaurant in Tribeca, he slid a folder across the table. "Preliminary draft," he said. It was a proposal for asset reclassification under a shared management entity. Her name remained primary, but the operational control language felt broad. "You move fast," she observed. "I plan ahead," he answered. She held his gaze. "You didn't plan this before my uncle passed." He smiled slightly. "Opportunities change strategy." It wasn't aggressive. It wasn't hostile, but it was different. And Casey, who built her entire life by reading contracts carefully, recognized when a tone shifted. She didn't argue. She didn't accuse. She simply started watching more closely. The question came late. They were in his apartment overlooking the Hudson River. The city was quieter than usual, rain tapping against the windows in a steady rhythm. The lights were low. The tension between them wasn't hostile. It was intimate. They had just finished talking about a redevelopment opportunity in Atlanta. Numbers, forecasts, exit timelines. Casey turned toward him on the bed. "Do you love me?" she asked. The question wasn't dramatic. It wasn't trembling. It was calm. Toby leaned in and kissed her shoulder. "Of course, I do." She didn't smile. "That's not what I asked." He shifted slightly, propping himself up on one elbow. "You're strong, you're intelligent, you're disciplined. Why would I not love you?" She watched him carefully. "Because those aren't feelings," she replied. "They're attributes." He paused, just briefly. Then he brushed his hand along her waist, pulling her closer. "You overanalyze everything," he murmured. "And you avoid direct answers," she countered. He kissed her again, slower this time, as if to redirect the conversation into closeness rather than clarity. The physical connection between them was real. It always had been. He learned her rhythm. She responded deliberately. There was tension layered into attraction, intensity balanced by restraint. But even in that warmth, she felt it. A slight distance in him, as if love, to Toby, needed structure, needed control, needed advantage. She rested her head against his chest, listening to his heartbeat. She didn't press further. Not that night. Toby proposed in New York. Not privately, not quietly. On a rooftop terrace in Midtown, overlooking the skyline, surrounded by soft lighting and carefully arranged white roses. Casey noticed the details immediately. The photographer positioned discreetly near the bar, the champagne already chilled, the timing precise, just after sunset when the sky still held color. He stepped forward confidently, ring box already in hand. "You challenge me," he said, voice steady. "You push me to think bigger. I want to build everything with you." The guests nearby clapped softly when he knelt. Casey looked down at him. He looked certain, composed. There was no hesitation in his eyes, only intention. She searched his face for doubt, for calculation, for anything that would confirm the unease she had felt in recent weeks. But in that moment, he looked genuine. "You won't lose yourself with me," he added quietly. We'll grow together. That line stayed with her. She wanted to believe it. She wanted to believe the ambition in him could coexist with love. The ring was elegant, minimal, expensive without being excessive. When she said yes, the crowd applauded louder. Toby stood and pulled her into an embrace that felt solid, secure, planned. As flashes from phones captured the moment, Casey told herself something simple. If love required risk, she was willing to take it. She did not ignore her instincts. She postponed them. Amora entered the picture long before the engagement. Toby introduced her casually. We've known each other for years, he said one evening, while scrolling through his phone. Same investment circles. She's sharp. Casey met her 2 weeks later at a networking dinner in Soho. Amora was polished, controlled, dressed in understated elegance. She spoke in careful sentences and smiled without showing too much. When she shook Casey's hand, her grip was firm. I've heard a lot about you, Amora said. From whom? Casey asked lightly. Amora smiled. Toby admires driven people. It was phrased like praise. It felt like evaluation. Over the next few months, Amora's presence became routine. She appeared at investor gatherings, at pre-wedding tastings, at strategy dinners Toby insisted were just business. Casey watched how Toby's tone shifted slightly around her, more relaxed, more familiar. They shared references Casey didn't recognize, private jokes about deals in Miami and Boston, inside language built over years of shared rooms. One afternoon during a wedding cake tasting in Charleston, Amora appeared unannounced. I was in town, she said smoothly. Thought I'd stop by. Toby didn't seem surprised. Casey did not react. She observed. Amora never crossed visible boundaries. She never touched Toby inappropriately, never said anything overt. But she lingered in conversations longer than necessary, held eye contact a second too long, and occasionally asked questions that felt strategic. Have you two discussed asset integration after the ceremony? She once asked, as if purely curious. Casey's smile remained calm. Yes, she replied. We discuss everything. Amora nodded, but her eyes flickered briefly toward Toby. The first sign was small. Toby began stepping away from the room to answer calls more often. Work, he would say, already moving toward the balcony or hallway. Casey didn't question it at first. Their lives revolved around deals. Calls at odd hours were normal. But patterns matter, and Casey had built her career on recognizing them. Amora's name appeared on his screen frequently, not hidden, not saved under initials, open, visible. Still, the timing felt precise. Late evenings, early mornings, moments when Casey was distracted reviewing documents or responding to emails. Once, during a weekend in Aspen with mutual investors, Casey returned from the hotel spa earlier than planned. She entered the suite quietly. Toby was on the phone. His tone was softer than usual. No, she doesn't question it, he said. She trusts me. Casey paused just outside the bedroom door. He ended the call before she entered. Everything okay? She asked casually. Just market updates, he replied, sliding his phone face down on the dresser. It wasn't the content of the calls. It was the shift in his posture afterward, measured, slightly guarded. Casey did not accuse. She began collecting. She reviewed small details, calendar overlaps, message timestamps, shared conference bookings. Nothing inappropriate on the surface, but frequency builds narrative. One night, she glanced at his phone while he showered. A message preview from Amora flashed across the screen. After the ceremony, we'll talk. Casey did not open it. She memorized it. Suspicion is not loud. It is quiet. The discovery did not happen in a rush. It happened on an ordinary Thursday night in Dallas. Toby had flown in for wedding planning meetings. He left his phone charging on the kitchen counter while stepping out to take a call on the balcony. He rarely left it unattended. That night, he did. The screen lit up. Amora, message preview visible. Make sure everything's clean before Saturday. Casey didn't move at first. She stared at the words. Not emotional, analytical. When the second notification appeared, she picked up the phone. The device was not locked. Their trust had always included open access. Until that moment, she had never used it. She opened the thread. Months of messages. Not romantic in tone. Strategic. Careful. Once the trust aligns, after she signs, she won't question it. Amora's responses were brief. Are you sure? She's smarter than you think. Don't underestimate her. The messages did not describe passion. They described positioning. Casey read every line. Slowly. Her chest did not tighten. Her hands did not shake. She took screenshots. Every page. Every exchange referencing the wedding. Then she placed the phone exactly where it had been. Screen face down. Charging. When Toby returned inside, he wrapped his arms around her waist from behind. You okay? He asked. She leaned back into him. I'm fine, she replied. And she was, because now she knew. Casey did not confront him that night. She did not bring up the messages. She did not demand explanation. Instead, she shifted her posture internally. When Toby spoke about finalizing guest lists, she listened more closely. When he referenced long-term alignment, she asked sharper follow-up questions. She wanted to see how far the strategy extended. During a wedding venue walkthrough in Charleston, Toby pointed toward the altar. Once we're married, he said casually, everything stabilizes. Stabilizes for who? She asked. For us, he replied smoothly. She nodded, but her attention stayed on the wording. Stabilize, align, secure. These were not romantic terms. They were structural. Over the next week, she reviewed her own legal protections quietly. Trust clauses, ownership thresholds, voting rights within her holding companies. She contacted her attorney without informing Toby. Hypothetically, she said during the call, if someone married me for asset access, how exposed would I be? Her attorney paused. Are you asking personally? I'm asking strategically, she answered. He outlined safeguards, prenuptial terms, trust barriers, conditional control measures. Casey adjusted accordingly. She did not cancel the wedding, not yet, because suspicion without confirmation is incomplete. She needed proof. And she knew something important about Toby. He believed she trusted him completely. That belief made him comfortable. Comfortable people reveal themselves. So Casey waited, and she watched. The morning of the wedding arrived calm. Charleston's sky was clear, pale blue stretching over the historic district. Carriages moved slowly along cobblestone streets. Guests checked into boutique hotels along King Street. Florists carried white arrangements into St. Michael's Chapel. Inside the bridal suite, Casey sat in front of a wide mirror framed in soft light. Hair half-curled, makeup unfinished. Her gown hung near the window, silk, structured, custom-designed in New York months earlier. Her maid of honor, Lila, paced excitedly behind her. I still can't believe this is finally happening, Lila said. You two are such a power couple. Casey smiled faintly. Power. That word had been used often in their relationship. She studied her reflection. There were no visible cracks, no trembling, no tears, only composure. Her phone rested quietly on the vanity beside her, silent, carrying evidence, carrying confirmation. Down the hall, groomsmen laughed loudly. Someone mentioned champagne. Wedding planners coordinated timing in hushed tones. Everything was running exactly as scheduled. Casey adjusted her posture in the chair. Do I look nervous? She asked calmly. Lila shook her head. You look unstoppable. That word felt closer to truth. Casey had built her entire life on preparation. This day would be no different. She rose from the chair and walked toward the hallway, robe brushing softly against polished floors. 3 hours until ceremony. 3 hours until vows. 3 hours until the truth would surface. She turned the corner toward the quieter wing of the chapel. And that's when she heard Toby's voice through the library door. The hallway was empty. Most guests had already taken their seats in the sanctuary. The organ music drifted faintly through the walls. A staff member hurried past carrying programs, embossed with gold lettering. Casey slowed as she approached the library. The door wasn't fully closed, just enough to create privacy, not enough to stop sound. Toby's voice carried clearly. After today, everything aligns. The trust folds into shared structure. She won't question it. A groomsman chuckled softly. You're sure she doesn't suspect anything? Casey worships me, Toby replied. The word struck differently this time, not as affection, as assumption. Amora's voice followed, low and controlled. You always said she was different. She is, Toby answered. Different doesn't mean permanent. There was a pause, then the line that settled everything. Love isn't in the contract. The air felt still. Casey did not move closer. She did not step back. She remained exactly where she stood. Through the narrow opening, she could see Toby's shoulder, his posture relaxed, his confidence visible. He wasn't nervous. He wasn't conflicted. He was certain. The wedding planner passed at the end of the hall and gave Casey a polite smile, unaware of what was unfolding. Inside the library, glass clinked. Someone laughed again. 3 hours until the ceremony. 3 hours until vows were spoken under stained glass and white florals. Casey's expression didn't change, but her understanding did. Casey reached into the pocket of her robe. Her phone felt cool against her palm. Inside the library, Toby continued speaking, confident and unguarded. Once we sign, operational control becomes cleaner. She trusts me. She won't push back. Amora's voice lowered. You're sure she won't look deeper? She doesn't need to, Toby replied. After today, everything's secure. Casey unlocked her phone silently. Her finger hovered for half a second. Then she opened the recording app. Pressed record. The hallway was quiet, except for distant wedding music and the soft hum of air conditioning. Every word from inside the room carried clearly. Groomsman MJ spoke next, and if she ever finds out, Toby didn't hesitate. She won't. The certainty in his tone erased any remaining doubt. This wasn't speculation. It wasn't miscommunication. It was intention. Casey kept her breathing steady as the conversation continued. They discussed timing, paperwork, post-ceremony steps, strategic adjustments once legal documents were finalized. No hesitation, no guilt. When she felt she had enough, she ended the recording. Saved it, backed it up to cloud storage. Her movements were precise, not rushed. She slipped the phone back into her robe just as footsteps approached from the opposite end of the hallway. A wedding coordinator smiled politely as she passed. Everything on schedule, the coordinator said cheerfully. Casey returned the smile. Perfect, she replied, and she meant it. Casey walked back toward the bridal suite slowly, not because she was shaken, because she was recalibrating. Each step felt deliberate against the polished wooden floors. The distant organ music swelled slightly as guests continued settling into their seats. Laughter drifted faintly from the courtyard outside. Inside her chest, there was no chaos, only alignment. The version of Toby she loved still existed in memory. The debates, the late-night calls, the rooftop proposal. But the man in that library had revealed something else. He did not see her as a partner. He saw her as leverage. That realization did not crush her. It clarified her. When she re-entered the bridal suite, Lila rushed toward her. Where did you go? They're almost ready for final photos. Casey moved toward the mirror again. I needed air, she replied calmly. Her reflection stared back at her, composed, centered, almost luminous. No red eyes, no trembling hands. If anything, her posture was stronger. Lila adjusted the strap of her robe. You're so calm. I'd be losing my mind right now. Casey's lips curved slightly. Why would I lose my mind? Because panic would have given Toby control. Because tears would have validated his assumption. Because walking away quietly would have allowed him to continue believing she worshipped him. Casey did not worship anyone. She believed in accountability. She turned toward the gown, hanging beside the window. 3 hours until ceremony. 3 hours to prepare. She wasn't cancelling anything. She was restructuring the outcome. Casey stepped out of the bridal suite with purpose. Not rushed, not frantic, measured. The wedding coordinator, Vanessa, stood near the front entrance, reviewing the ceremony timeline on a tablet. "Vanessa," Casey called gently. The coordinator turned, smiling brightly. "You look stunning already. We're perfectly on schedule. I need one small adjustment," Casey said calmly. Vanessa's expression tightened slightly, the natural reaction of someone managing a high-profile event. "What kind of adjustment?" "I'd like a personalized vow moment, separate microphone, clear audio, no interruptions." Vanessa nodded. "That's already standard, but we can emphasize it." "Do you want lighting adjusted too?" "Yes," Casey replied. "I want the house lights slightly raised during my vows." Vanessa paused. "Raised, so everyone can see clearly." There was no suspicion in the coordinator's eyes. Brides often requested spotlight changes or emotional emphasis. "Absolutely," Vanessa said. "Anything else?" Casey considered her next words carefully. "Make sure the audio recording system is capturing cleanly. I don't want any distortion." "Of course." Casey smiled. "Thank you." As Vanessa walked away to relay instructions to the sound team, Casey glanced toward the altar inside the sanctuary. White floral arrangements framed the stage. Crystal chandeliers glimmered softly overhead. Rows of guests in tailored suits and silk dresses waited in anticipation. Everything looked flawless. She wasn't altering the ceremony, she was optimizing it. The chapel had installed a projection system for sentimental reasons. A slideshow of childhood photos was scheduled to play softly during the reception. Guests loved those touches. They created warmth, nostalgia. Casey intended to use it differently. She found the DJ near the side entrance, adjusting cables beside a portable control station. "Everything synced?" she asked lightly. "Perfectly," he replied. "Photos will roll after the first dance." "I'd like the projector connected during the ceremony as well," she said. He looked surprised. "During the vows?" "Yes." "For what purpose?" "A personal reading," she answered evenly. "I'll cue you." He hesitated only briefly. Brides made last-minute additions all the time. "No problem," he said. "Just signal me." Casey nodded. "I'll say, 'Please direct your attention to the screen.' That's your cue." He typed something into his tablet. All set. Casey stepped back into the sanctuary. She studied the large screen mounted discreetly above the altar. Elegant, unassuming, invisible to most guests until activated. She imagined the sequence in her mind. Toby finishing his vows. Her turn. The shift. The screen illuminating. Truth displayed in clean black text. No shouting. No spectacle. Just clarity. Her phone vibrated gently in her hand. A notification from cloud storage confirming the audio backup had uploaded successfully. She silenced it. Everything was aligning. Not the way Toby intended. Casey returned briefly to the bridal suite, not to cry, to prepare. She sat at the small writing desk near the window and opened her laptop. The screenshots she had taken weeks earlier were already organized in a secure folder. Months of text exchanges, clear timestamps, clear intent, no dramatic language, just calculated planning. She selected the most direct messages. After she signs, control shifts. She trusts me completely. Everything stabilizes once we're legally aligned. And the final line from that morning's recording, "Love isn't in the contract." She formatted them into a clean transcript. Black text on white background, no commentary, no editing, just evidence. Then she printed 3 copies, one for the screen, one for herself, one sealed inside an envelope labeled legal. She folded the copy for the screen into her vow booklet. No shaking hands, no hesitation. Lila stepped into the room mid-preparation. "What are you printing? Secret vows?" "In a way," Casey replied calmly. Lila laughed, unaware. "You're going to make everyone cry." Casey closed the laptop. That's not the goal. She slipped the transcript into her bouquet wrapping, hidden but accessible. The wedding gown was brought forward, zippered carefully, buttons fastened, the final layer of presentation complete. Casey stood fully dressed now. White silk, veil secured. Evidence concealed. She wasn't acting out of impulse. She was finalizing structure. The music began. Soft strings filled the chapel as guests turned in their seats. The doors at the back of the sanctuary remained closed, waiting for their cue. Casey stood behind them, bouquet in hand. Her father was not present to walk her down the aisle. He hadn't been in her life long enough to earn that role. Instead, she chose to walk alone. It felt appropriate. Vanessa leaned in. Ready? Casey nodded once. Through the doors, she could see the altar. Toby stood there in a tailored black suit, posture confident, expression composed. His groomsmen flanked him. Amora sat 3 rows back, champagne-colored dress catching the light. Casey locked eyes with her briefly. Amora looked away first. The doors opened. A hush swept through the room. Every head turned. Casey stepped forward. Her pace was steady, not rushed, not hesitant. The aisle felt longer than usual, but she did not waver. She could feel the weight of hundreds of eyes, admiration, anticipation, joy. Toby smiled as she approached, warm, reassuring, as if nothing had shifted. She reached the altar and handed her bouquet to Lila. Their hands brushed briefly. "You're glowing," Lila whispered. Casey faced Toby. Up close, he looked exactly as he always had, controlled, charming, certain. He leaned in slightly. "You look perfect," he murmured. Casey met his gaze. "I know," she replied. The officiant began. The ceremony moved forward exactly as planned, and Casey waited for her moment. The chapel held its breath as Casey reached the altar. St. Michael's historic stained glass windows filtered soft afternoon light across the white floral arrangements. Crystal chandeliers reflected gold accents along the pews. Every seat was filled. Casey stood tall. No trembling hands, no watery eyes. If anything, she appeared stronger than she had during rehearsals the night before. Guests leaned toward one another in admiration. "She looks incredible. They're such a perfect match." Toby's expression carried pride. His jaw was set confidently, his shoulders squared. To everyone watching, he looked like a man about to secure the future he had carefully planned. The officiant welcomed the gathering. "Friends and family, we are here today to witness the union." Casey listened calmly. She did not focus on the words. She focused on timing. The raised house lights were subtle but effective. Faces in the congregation were visible. Every reaction would be seen clearly. She glanced briefly at the screen mounted above the altar. Dark, waiting. Toby reached for her hands as instructed. His grip was firm, possessive, almost. She allowed it. The ceremony progressed through readings and blessings. A cousin recited a passage about partnership. Applause followed lightly. From the outside, nothing appeared unusual. Casey's expression remained serene, radiant, and that calm unsettled something in Toby. He leaned slightly closer. "You okay?" he whispered under his breath. She held his gaze. "Perfect," she replied. As the officiant transitioned to the vows, Casey allowed her gaze to move beyond Toby for a brief moment. 3 rows back, left side aisle. Amora sat with her legs crossed neatly, hands folded in her lap. Champagne-colored silk draped over her shoulder. Expression composed, but not relaxed. Their eyes met. It lasted no more than 2 seconds. Long enough. Casey didn't glare. She didn't accuse. She held steady eye contact, calm, knowing, unshaken. Amora's chin lifted slightly at first, almost defiant. Then something shifted, a tightening around the eyes, a flicker of recognition. Casey had heard everything. Amora understood it without a word being spoken. She adjusted in her seat, posture less fluid now. Her fingers gripped her clutch purse tighter than before. Around her, guests remained unaware. They smiled politely, whispering about how beautiful the ceremony felt. A few dabbed their eyes. Toby followed Casey's line of sight briefly. He noticed nothing unusual, because he believed he was still in control. Casey turned her attention back to the altar. The officiant smiled warmly. "Let us begin the exchange of vows." Toby inhaled deeply. Confident, prepared, Casey's hands rested calmly in his. Her pulse was steady. Her timing was precise. Toby began first. He had rehearsed his vows twice the night before. His voice carried smoothly through the chapel, steady and practiced. "Casey, from the moment I met you in Chicago, I knew you were different," he said. "You challenge me. You inspire me. You make me better." Guests smiled. A few nodded approvingly. He continued, "I promise to protect you, to stand beside you in every decision, to build a future grounded in strength and trust." Strength. Trust. The words echoed softly against the stone walls. Casey watched him speak. His tone was sincere, measured. He knew how to present conviction. Every pause was intentional, every sentence structured for emotional effect. He even reached for her hands at the right moments, squeezing gently as if sealing each promise physically. From the outside, he looked like a man deeply in love. The groomsman stood upright behind him. MJ avoided looking directly at Casey. Axel stared at the floor for longer than necessary. When Toby finished, the applause was quiet but warm. The officiant turned toward Casey with a welcoming gesture. And now, Casey. A microphone was handed to her. The raised lighting illuminated the room slightly brighter. Faces clear, eyes attentive. Toby smiled at her, confident she would respond with devotion. Casey accepted the microphone. She unfolded her vow booklet slowly and looked up. The microphone felt light in Casey's hand. The chapel quieted immediately. Even the faint rustle of programs stopped. Toby watched her with expectation. He leaned slightly closer, ready for whatever emotional declaration she was about to deliver. Casey unfolded the single sheet inside her vow booklet. Not the decorative handwritten card prepared weeks ago, the printed transcript. Her voice was calm when she began. "I wrote something different." A few guests smiled, assuming sentiment. Toby's smile tightened slightly. Casey continued, "I once believed love was built on trust, on transparency, on partnership without hidden terms." The room listened closely. She did not rush. She did not tremble. She lifted her gaze to meet Toby's directly. "But today, hours before this ceremony, I learned something important." A faint murmur rippled through the first few rows. Toby shifted subtly. "Casey," he whispered under his breath, barely audible. She raised one hand gently, not aggressive, simply firm. "Please direct your attention to the screen." The DJ reacted instantly. The projector hummed to life. The dark screen above the altar illuminated in sharp white. Black text appeared, time-stamped, clear. The first line filled the wall behind them. "After today, everything aligns." Gasps began softly, then spread. Toby's face drained of color. Casey did not look at the screen. She looked at him and waited. The light from the projector cast a faint glow across the altar. But Casey did not look at the screen. She kept her eyes on Toby. The microphone remained steady in her hand. "I wrote something different," she repeated softly. The room shifted in its seats. Some guests leaned forward. Others glanced at one another, unsure whether this was performance or confession. Toby attempted a small smile. "Casey," he murmured quietly, trying to regain rhythm, "we can talk about this privately." Her expression did not change. "This is private," she replied calmly. 300 people who came to witness truth. The word landed with precision. Truth. She turned slightly toward the congregation. "I believed partnership meant transparency. I believed respect meant honesty even when it was uncomfortable." Her voice did not rise. It sharpened. "Hours before walking down this aisle, I overheard something." A hush spread across the chapel. The officiant stepped back instinctively. Casey continued, "I heard the man I was about to marry say, Marrying her is the safest move I've ever made." Gasps echoed faintly. Toby's jaw tightened. I heard him say, "After today, everything aligns." Silence thickened. And I heard him say, she paused briefly, eyes never leaving his, "Love isn't in the contract." The room felt suspended. Casey inhaled slowly. I did not mishear. I recorded it. Toby's composure fractured for the first time. "That's not what you think," he began. She lifted her hand gently. "No," she said evenly. "It is exactly what I think." She turned toward the screen. "And now, so does everyone else." The screen brightened fully. White background. Black text. Clean. Unedited. The first message appeared in large font. "Toby, after she signs, control shifts. She trusts me." A ripple of shock moved through the pews. Someone whispered, "Is that real?" Another voice near the back muttered, "Oh my God." The next message faded in beneath it. "Amora, are you sure she won't question it?" Then Toby's reply, "Toby, she worships me." The word hung heavily in the air. Casey stood still beside him. Guests turned slowly toward Toby, then toward Amora, who sat frozen 3 rows back. Her face had lost color. Her posture stiffened. The calm she carried earlier had disappeared. The screen shifted again. Time-stamped. That morning. "Toby, marrying her is the safest move I've ever made." A sharp gasp cut through the room. The groomsman MJ lowered his head. Excel stared straight ahead, unmoving. Casey spoke without raising her voice. This was discussed hours before this ceremony. The final line appeared in bold. "Toby, love isn't in the contract." Silence crashed into the chapel. No music, no movement, only the faint hum of the projector overhead. Toby stepped forward slightly. "Casey, stop this," he said under his breath. She didn't flinch. "Is any of it false?" she asked quietly. He didn't answer. He couldn't. All eyes were on him now, not admiring, assessing. The structure he believed he controlled had shifted in seconds, and the truth was no longer private. Casey turned fully toward Toby now. No audience, no projection, just him. "You mistook loyalty for weakness," she said clearly. Her voice carried without force. It didn't need volume. It had precision. Toby swallowed, eyes scanning the room as if searching for a way to regain footing. "Casey, this is a misunderstanding," he insisted. "You're taking strategic conversations out of context." She held his gaze. "Context?" she repeated. "You discussed timing my trust. You discussed shifting control. You discussed securing assets." She stepped closer. "You never discussed loving me." A murmur passed through the front rows. The officiant looked uncertain, hands clasped tightly. Toby lowered his voice. "I love you," he said urgently. "Then why was love absent from your plan?" she asked. He didn't answer. Casey reached for her left hand. Slowly, deliberately, the engagement ring caught the light as she slid it off her finger. The movement was calm, unrushed. She placed it into Toby's palm. The contact between their hands lasted 1 second longer than necessary. "Love isn't in your contract," she said quietly. "You made that clear." His fingers curled instinctively around the ring, but he did not close his fist. He looked smaller now, not physically, strategically. The room watched every second. Casey stepped back. "I will not merge my life with someone who sees me as leverage." Toby opened his mouth again, but this time, no words came. Because there was nothing left to negotiate, Casey did not look at the screen again. She did not look at Amora. She did not look at the guests. She looked straight ahead. Then she turned. The silk of her gown moved softly across the polished floor as she stepped away from the altar. No rushing, no collapse, just direction. The chapel remained frozen. 300 people, silent. No one clapped, no one spoke. The officiant stepped aside instinctively, as if clearing a path for something larger than ceremony. Behind her, Toby stood motionless, engagement ring still resting in his open palm. The projection screen dimmed slowly. The truth had already done its work. As Casey reached the midpoint of the aisle, a chair scraped faintly against the stone floor. Amora stood abruptly, every head turned. But Casey did not. She continued walking. By the time she reached the back doors, the silence had become heavy, not with confusion, with recognition. The doors opened. Sunlight flooded in. Casey stepped outside into the Charleston afternoon air, and only then did the chapel breathe again. Inside, whispers erupted. Toby remained at the altar, exposed, not by accusation, by evidence. CTA third, post-climax engagement pause here. Was she right to expose him publicly? Should she have handled it privately? Or was this the only way to protect herself? Comment your answer below. And if you believe dignity should never be negotiated, like this video so more people can see this story. Subscribe to Mr. Victor Storytime for more real stories about strength, accountability, and the decisions that change everything. The videos surfaced within an hour, not from Casey, from a guest in the third row. By sunset, clips of the ceremony were circulating across Instagram, X, and LinkedIn. The moment the projector lit up, the freeze on Toby's face, the silence as Casey removed her ring. Headlines formed quickly. Bride exposes groom at the altar. Real estate power couple wedding implodes. Love isn't in the contract goes viral. Casey did not post. She did not comment. She turned off notifications and handed her phone to her attorney. Toby's name began trending by evening. Industry analysts dissected the text messages shown on screen. Commentators questioned the ethics behind his asset strategy. Former colleagues who had once praised his aggressiveness now remained silent. By midnight, a financial blog published an article titled, "When Strategy Crosses the Line." Clips of the vows replayed repeatedly. The line echoed everywhere. You mistook loyalty for weakness. It became the headline. Investors began calling his office the next morning, not to congratulate, to inquire. Trust matters in finance, and perception shifts markets. Casey stayed inside her Charleston hotel suite that night. No interviews, no statements, just quiet. She sat by the window overlooking the harbor and removed the remaining pins from her hair one by one. She didn't cry. Not because she wasn't hurt, but because she wasn't surprised anymore. The exposure wasn't revenge. It was boundary enforcement, and boundaries, once drawn publicly, are harder to erase. Monday morning hit harder than the wedding day. Toby arrived at his Manhattan office earlier than usual. The lobby felt different. Conversations paused as he passed. Assistants avoided prolonged eye contact. His phone had not stopped vibrating since dawn. 3 investor emails marked urgent, 2 requests for clarification, 1 meeting cancellation. The subject lines were direct. We need transparency. Explain the alignment strategy mentioned publicly. Has asset consolidation been misrepresented in prior deals? The issue was no longer personal. It was professional. In finance, character and credibility move capital. Once doubt enters the room, it spreads quickly. At 9:15 a.m., his senior partner requested a closed-door meeting. The tone was controlled but sharp. We need to understand if this is a misunderstanding or a pattern, the partner said. Toby defended himself. It was private conversation taken out of context. Then clarify the context, the partner replied. Silence lingered, because the context was exactly what had been shown. Strategy without consent. Alignment without disclosure. By noon, 2 pending deals were placed on hold, not cancelled, paused. Which was worse. In conference rooms across the city, his name was now associated with risk beyond numbers. Trust erosion is quiet. It does not shout. It withdraws. Meanwhile, Casey met with her legal advisor in Charleston. She did not smile. She did not celebrate. She simply ensured that every document under her control remained exactly that, under her control. The wedding had ended. But the consequences were just beginning. Casey waited 48 hours before saying anything publicly. No emotional statements, no interviews, no retaliation. On Wednesday morning, a short press release appeared through her company's official channel. 4 sentences. Clear, measured. Integrity is non-negotiable. Partnership requires transparency. My business interests remain independently structured and protected. I will continue operating with clarity and accountability. That was all. No mention of Toby by name. No insults. No personal details. Industry publications picked it up immediately. Analysts contrasted her tone with the viral footage from the chapel. They described her response as disciplined, controlled, mature. Several female founders reposted the statement with commentary about autonomy and financial literacy in relationships. By afternoon, a prominent business podcast requested an interview. She declined. Casey did not want attention. She wanted distance. At her Dallas office later that week, she gathered her executive team in the conference room. "We move forward," she said simply. No one asked about the wedding. They discussed acquisitions instead. 2 commercial properties in Austin. 1 redevelopment opportunity in Savannah. Normal business resumed. Her staff followed her lead. Because leadership is not about spectacle, it is about direction. That evening, alone in her apartment, Casey removed the final wedding decor boxes delivered from Charleston. White ribbon, unused place cards, custom invitations. She placed them neatly into storage. Not angrily, not dramatically, just decisively. The narrative had closed. The future remained open. The first quiet morning after the headlines faded felt unfamiliar. No alerts, no trending clips, no speculation threads, just stillness. Casey returned to her routine deliberately. Morning run along the Katy Trail in Dallas. Coffee at the same corner cafe she'd frequented for years. Office by 9. Structure steadied her, but healing required more than routine. She scheduled therapy, not because she felt broken, because she valued clarity. In the therapist's office overlooking downtown, she spoke plainly. "I'm not devastated," she said. "I'm disappointed that I ignored signs." The therapist leaned forward slightly. "What signs?" "Language," Casey replied. "Tone. Control disguised as partnership." They unpacked it slowly. Not Toby first. Her patterns. Why she had postponed instinct in favor of hope. Why ambition had felt compatible with love. "Do you still care about him?" the therapist asked. Casey paused. "Yes," she admitted. But care doesn't override evidence. That distinction mattered. She didn't romanticize what happened. She analyzed it. She also protected herself. Trust clauses were reinforced legally. Advisors were instructed to require dual-layer review on any joint venture proposals moving forward. Emotion did not dissolve her structure. It refined it. Weeks passed. The noise around the wedding dimmed. In its place, something steadier formed. Not bitterness, not fear, discernment. Casey did not close herself off from love. She adjusted her threshold for it. And that adjustment changed everything. Silence feels different when it follows exposure. Toby learned that quickly. His Manhattan apartment, once filled with late-night calls and confident pacing, felt larger now, colder. The city lights outside the windows no longer felt victorious. They felt distant. The first week after the wedding fallout, he tried to maintain control. He issued internal memos. He scheduled meetings. He reassured partners. But reassurance without trust is hollow. Investors responded politely, carefully. Deals slowed. Invitations to exclusive strategy dinners stopped arriving. Industry groups that once spotlighted him shifted attention elsewhere. No one attacked him openly. They simply stepped back. Reputation erosion does not announce itself loudly. It reduces access. At home, the engagement ring sat on the kitchen counter where he had placed it that night. He had not put it away, not thrown it out, not returned it. It remained exactly where Casey left it, in his open palm. He replayed the moment in his mind repeatedly. Her calm, her precision, the way she said, "You mistook loyalty for weakness." He had expected confrontation, anger, emotion. He had not expected composure. He poured himself a drink one evening and stared at his reflection in the window. For the first time in years, there was no plan forming, no leverage strategy, no next move, only recognition. He had not lost a deal. He had lost credibility. And he had underestimated the one person who saw through him clearly. Regret did not arrive immediately. At first, Toby focused on damage control, statements, clarifications, quiet meetings behind closed doors. But in the pauses between conversations, Casey's voice replayed in his mind. "You never discussed loving me." That line unsettled him more than the public exposure. He began to examine his own language, alignment, control, structure, security, all the words he valued in business, all the words he used in private. Rarely had he used vulnerability, rarely had he offered uncertainty. He scheduled a call with Amora one evening. The conversation was brief. "This went too far," she said. "It didn't go far enough," he replied quietly. There was no anger in his tone, only acknowledgement. "You pushed the timing," she added. "I warned you she was sharper than you thought." He closed his eyes briefly. "She was," he admitted. After the call, he sat in silence for a long time. He thought about the rooftop proposal, the late-to-night debates, the way Casey never admired him blindly. She evaluated him, challenged him, chose him. He had mistaken her independence for inevitability. He believed she would remain regardless of his strategy. That assumption was his failure, not the public exposure, not the viral footage. The assumption. He picked up the engagement ring from the counter, held it in his hand. For the first time, he didn't see leverage. He saw loss, and loss, when earned honestly, forces reflection. 3 months passed before Toby showed up at Casey's office. No announcement, no cameras, no public setting. He requested a meeting through her assistant like any other executive. Casey allowed it. At 3 p.m., he stepped into her Dallas conference room. Neutral space, glass walls, no personal photos, no emotional history visible. She remained seated at the head of the table. He stood for a moment before sitting opposite her. "You look well," he said quietly. "I am," she replied. Silence stretched between them. This time, no audience, no altar, no projection screen, just two people who once planned a future. "I was wrong," Toby began. Casey did not interrupt. "I let ambition override judgment," he continued. "I thought merging assets was logical. I thought securing structure made sense. You thought I was leverage," she said calmly. He swallowed. Yes, there was no defense in his tone now. No reframing, no strategy. "I loved you," he added, softer this time. "I just didn't trust that love alone was enough." Casey leaned back slightly. "You didn't trust me," she corrected. He nodded. The distinction mattered. Love without trust is control disguised as affection. "I don't expect forgiveness," he said. "Good," she replied evenly. "Because that's not the starting point." She folded her hands on the table. "If you want a conversation, it begins with accountability, not apology." He met her gaze. For once, he did not try to outmaneuver it. Casey did not soften her posture. She did not offer comfort. She offered terms. "If you want to rebuild anything," she said, voice steady, "it will not be built on private conversations and strategic wording." Toby nodded slowly. "I understand." "No," she replied calmly. "You're beginning to—" She outlined the conditions clearly. First, financial separation. Permanent. No shared entities. No structural overlap. He agreed immediately. Second, individual therapy. Not public relations counseling. Actual work. He didn't hesitate this time either. "I've already started," he said. She studied his face, measuring truth. "Third," she continued, "no access to my legal framework, no advisory role, no consultation requests disguised as conversation." "That's fair," he answered. "It's necessary," she corrected. The room felt different now. Not tense, Precise. Casey leaned forward slightly. If you want time with me, it will be public. Neutral spaces. No late-night strategy sessions. No merging of professional and personal. He accepted it. Because this was not negotiation. It was eligibility. You don't own me, she said quietly. I don't want to, he replied. That answer carried less certainty than before, but more honesty. She stood, signaling the meeting's end. This is not a second chance, she clarified. It's an evaluation. He nodded once. And for the first time in their relationship, Toby understood something clearly. Respect is earned in transparency, not assumed through confidence. Their first meeting after the office conversation took place at a public cafe in Dallas. Midday. Glass walls. Open seating. No privacy. Casey arrived first. She chose a table near the window where visibility worked in her favor. When Toby entered, he didn't reach for her immediately. No familiar touch. No assumption of closeness. He sat across from her, not beside her. That detail mattered. How's therapy? She asked directly. He didn't deflect. Uncomfortable, he answered. Necessary, she nodded. And your firm? Restructuring internally, he said. More oversight. More transparency. She listened. Not emotionally. Factually. There was no romance in the air that afternoon. No lingering glances. No flirtation disguised as strategy. Just conversation. Two adults, evaluating whether respect could be rebuilt. Over the next few weeks, they met 3 more times. A lunch in Uptown. A short walk along the Katy Trail. A bookstore cafe near Highland Park. Always public. Always structured. He no longer dominated discussions. He asked questions, instead. About her projects. About her boundaries. About what she needed in partnership. He listened without interrupting. That, more than apologies, caught her attention. One afternoon, as they stood outside her building, he paused. I don't expect you to forget, he said. You shouldn't, she replied. I just want to do better. Casey studied him. Not searching for charm, searching for consistency. Because consistency reveals change more clearly than words. The shift did not happen through grand gestures. It happened through uncomfortable conversations. One evening, they met at a quiet restaurant in Bishop Arts District. No private room, no dimly lit corner. Just a table near the center of the dining floor. Casey decided to press deeper. Why was control so important to you? She asked directly. Toby didn't look away this time. Because control feels like safety, he answered. If I structure everything, nothing surprises me. She held his gaze. And if someone can't be structured? He exhaled slowly. Then I try to manage them. There it was. Not manipulation disguised as strategy. Admission. Casey leaned back slightly. You tried to manage me. Yes. The honesty was no longer polished. It was exposed. He continued. I thought if our assets aligned, you couldn't walk away. She didn't react emotionally. You built security by limiting my freedom. He nodded once. That's what I'm learning. They spoke for nearly 2 hours that night, about fear, about ego, about the difference between partnership and possession. At one point, the server refilled their water glasses quietly, unaware that something larger than dinner was unfolding. Casey did not rush forgiveness. She asked sharper questions. He answered without defensiveness. For the first time in their history, there was no strategy under the conversation, only accountability. When they stood to leave, there was no physical contact, no dramatic closure, just recognition that something had shifted. And this time, the shift was intentional. The first time he reached for her again, it wasn't automatic. It was careful. They had met for coffee near White Rock Lake on a quiet Saturday morning. The air carried that early fall crispness Dallas sometimes offered without warning. Joggers passed. Dogs tugged gently at leashes. Life moved around them, unaware of the history between the two seated at a small patio table. They had just finished discussing a redevelopment project Casey was leading in Austin. I'm proud of you, Toby said. She studied him. Pride isn't ownership, she replied evenly. I know, he answered. That's not what I meant. Silence settled between them. Not tense, just thoughtful. As they stood to leave, he paused. He didn't step into her space. He didn't assume closeness. He simply asked, "May I?" The question surprised her more than the request. "For what?" she asked calmly. "To hold your hand." No confidence layered into it, no entitlement, just permission. Casey looked at him for a long second. In the past, he would have reached instinctively, claiming familiarity as justification. Now, he waited. She extended her hand slowly. He took it carefully. Not tight, not possessive. Just contact. Warmth returned, but it felt different. Not built on momentum, built on choice. They walked toward the parking lot like that. Hands joined lightly, both aware of how much had changed. This time, she wasn't leaning into potential. She was evaluating consistency, and the smallest gestures often reveal the deepest adjustments. A year passed before he asked again, not on a rooftop, not under cameras, not surrounded by guests, in her living room. Dallas skyline visible beyond wide windows, no photographer, no flowers staged strategically, no audience, just them. Casey was reviewing documents at the dining table when Toby stepped closer. "I don't want spectacle," he said quietly. She looked up. "I don't want leverage," she replied. He nodded. "I know." He reached into his jacket and removed a small velvet box. He didn't kneel immediately. He waited for her full attention. "No contracts," he said. "No merged structures, no hidden expectations, just partnership." She closed the folder in front of her. "You trust me?" she asked. "Yes, completely." Yes. There was no hesitation this time. Not because he was confident, because he was certain. She stood, walked toward him slowly. "You understand," she said, "that I will never shrink myself to fit your fear." "I don't want you smaller," he replied. "I want you beside me." He knelt then, simple, unrehearsed. The ring he offered was elegant but understated, different from the first. She studied him carefully, looking for calculation, for strategy, for control. She found none, only steadiness. She extended her hand. "Yes," she said, not because she forgot, because she verified. "Do you believe people can truly change? Or once trust is broken, is it gone for good?" Comment your thoughts below. And if this story reminded you that dignity should never be compromised, like this video, and subscribe to Mr. Victor Storytime for more powerful stories about strength, accountability, and real growth. The second wedding was nothing like the first. No cathedral, no chandeliers, no projection screens, just a private vineyard in Napa Valley, 50 guests, close friends, immediate family, no industry executives, no strategic connections. The ceremony took place outdoors beneath open sky, wooden chairs arranged in 2 simple rows. No raised platform, no elaborate decor. Casey chose a minimalist ivory dress this time. No dramatic veil, no spectacle. Toby stood waiting in a simple tailored suit, hands clasped loosely in front of him. There was no rehearsed smile, no performance posture, just calm. When Casey walked toward him, she did not feel tension. She felt certainty. The officiant spoke briefly about commitment and accountability, not destiny, not perfection, commitment. When it was Toby's turn to speak, he didn't hold prepared note cards. "I once thought structure protected everything," he began. "But structure without honesty destroys trust." He looked directly at her. "I will never let ambition replace integrity. Not in business, not in love." There were no murmurs this time. No surprise, only quiet approval. Casey stepped forward for her vows. "I do not promise blind loyalty," she said clearly. "I promise truth. I promise independence within partnership." She paused. "I will never shrink myself to fit your fear." Toby nodded slowly. "I don't want you smaller," he answered. "I want you equal." That word settled over the vineyard like sunlight. Equal. no merging of identity, no leveraging of assets, just choice. When they exchanged rings, it wasn't symbolic of ownership. It was acknowledgement. They signed a prenuptial agreement weeks earlier, detailed, transparent, reviewed independently, not because they expected failure, because clarity protects respect. As they leaned in to kiss, there were no gasps, no shock, only warmth. The guests clapped softly, not because something explosive happened, because something stable had been built. Later, during the small reception, Casey stood briefly to address the room. "A year ago," she said, "I learned that love without accountability is fragile. Today, we stand here because accountability was chosen." She didn't look at Toby when she said it. She looked at everyone. Integrity is not negotiable, not in contracts, not in commitment. There were no viral cameras, no trending hashtags, just a quiet acknowledgement that growth had occurred. Toby approached her afterward, while guests mingled near the vineyard tables. "Thank you," he said quietly. "For what?" she asked. "For not walking away permanently." She studied him. "I walked away when you needed me to," she replied. "You walked back differently." That distinction mattered. They did not rebuild what they had before. They built something stronger, transparent, independent, chosen daily. As the sun lowered over the vineyard and the sky shifted into soft gold, Casey rested her head briefly against his shoulder, not because she needed him, because she wanted him. And that difference left everyone speechless in a very different way. Today is not about a wedding. It's about a choice. A year ago, I stood in front of a room full of people and realized something important. Love without honesty is not love. It's negotiation, and negotiation has no place in commitment. I learned that loyalty should never require silence. I learned that strength is not loud, it is steady. And I learned that walking away from what disrespects you is not loss. It is protection. Many people think love means sacrifice. It does, but it should never mean shrinking yourself. It should never mean lowering your standards to make someone else comfortable. Real partnership does not reduce you. It respects you. It does not manage you. It trusts you. If someone needs control to feel secure, they are not ready for love. If someone fears your independence, they do not deserve your closeness. You are not leverage. You are not a strategy. You are not an asset to be aligned. You are a person, and the right partner will stand beside you, not above you. So if you ever find yourself standing at an altar, or at a crossroads, or at the edge of a difficult decision, remember this. Dignity is not negotiable. Integrity is not optional. And love that requires you to shrink is not love worth keeping. Choose clarity. Choose accountability. Choose yourself. Because when you do, the right person will not try to control you. They will meet you